All right.
technology doesn't always work. All right, let's start. Okay, let's start. So this is my pitch into women's sports. I'm going to walk you through this. All right. So this is my understanding of kind of where we're starting. So this is my looking at the data here. So India's not had a lot of success in the Olympics. I think everyone knows that. And as far as I think, I'm right about this. India's never won a gold medal in women's sports. I think that's true, right? They've won a few in sports, not very many though. So not a lot of success in the Olympics. If you look at what determines Olympic success, it's primarily, there's three variables. Hosting Olympics obviously helps. Countries that host it, they have an advantage. But the other two variables are population and average income. And so obviously more people you have, more likely you'll have great athletes. Average income deals with how many resources you have. If you multiply population by average income, that's actually a nation's national income. That's average income times population is national income, or GDP, as the economists like to say, which I don't think is a helpful term. I think it's better to say national income. But and then when you look at national income, India ranks fifth in the world. So by this measure, India should be really, really successful at the Olympics, and they're not, because this is not something that India has been investing in historically. So where should India invest? So the point of this is I think India's at a position where they could be very successful at the Olympics. And so this is the discussion. This is going back to one of the first articles on this. Developing Olympic caliber athletes requires considerable expenditures on facility personnel. Wealthier countries are more likely to have individuals that can make those investments. And wealthier countries are also more likely to have athletics as part of schooling and have leisure time devoted to sports. So if you have the resources to create sports, then you'll be more successful in the Olympics. And I think we can make the case that India definitely has the resources. It's a matter of choosing where to invest. All right, so the question is, if investment leads to more success, where should they focus? And I would say, I think women's sports is where I'd focus. So I'm going to talk about a couple of myths of what sort of holds people back from investing in women's sports. And the first one is the very basic one. It's this idea that sports are really for men. Men are better at sports than women, and that women's sports are somehow inferior to men's sports. And I'm going to go through and talk about why I think that's a myth. So this is the way people typically think about the question. So this is looking at 100-meter dash times, all-time records. All-time records in 100-meter dash times. The top are the men, and they are about a second faster than the women. So from that perspective, the top men are better than the top women. Men are better than women. Okay, that's typically the way a lot of men think about this. What's interesting is as you get the distance longer, and this is kind of odd because it used to be the case that women were told that they can't run marathons. Women shouldn't run long distance. It's not good for them. But it turns out the opposite is true. Women are amazing at long distances. Men are not so amazing at long distances. And as the distance gets longer and longer and longer, women get better and better and better at it. So that when you get to the ultra marathons, ones that go like 200 miles, women tend to win those. Men tend not. And so this point is that whether or not women or men are better at a sport on average does depend on what sport we're talking about. There are sports that women seem like they're better at it than men. So there is a case that, well, there are sports that women are absolutely better. I'm going to make the argument that that's also irrelevant. So this is actually a famous quote from the book The Second Sex, which is one of the very first books in gender studies, and this quote pretty much captures the view about what we should focus on in evaluating sports. In sports, the end in view is not success independent of physical equipment; it's rather the attainment of perfection within the limitation of each physical type. The featherweight boxing champion is as much a champion as a heavyweight. The women's skiing champion is not inferior to the faster male champion. They belong to two different classes. So the argument that we make in Slaying the Trolls is what matters is best in class, not best in absolute terms. And you can see this when we turn to the sport of boxing. This is ESPN's ranking of the top boxers last month in the world. And you can see that Terence Crawford is listed as the best boxer in the world. Okay. He's a welterweight. The second one is a heavyweight. The third is a featherweight. Okay. If the featherweight gets in the ring with the heavyweight, that's not going to be a good outcome for the featherweight. The featherweight weighs like 150 pounds. The heavyweight weighs 250 pounds. They won't even allow that fight to happen. They won't allow boxing matches to happen if somebody is 1 pound over the limit of the weight class. That's how much they think weight makes a difference. So if you're having in your head this idea, well, men are better than women in sports, therefore men's sports are superior, and that's what people should want to watch, well, then you can't explain why anyone would go to a featherweight boxing match, because at a featherweight boxing match, there are probably people in the audience who could beat the boxers in the ring, right? These guys only weigh 115 pounds. I think I could find somebody sitting here who weighs 250 who I would give a shot at winning this. And so why are you watching this match? Well, because that's not relevant. I don't care whether the featherweight can beat the heavyweight. I only care if the featherweight can beat the other featherweight. It's best in class that matters. And that's the same reason why in America, college sports are very popular. College athletes are actually not very good relative to professionals on average. There are a few college athletes that become professionals. Most of them don't. And any professional team would do very well against any college team. But if you were to say, you were to compare two different matches, one, the two best teams in men's college basketball play each other on national television. That'll get national television audience in America. If you say two best teams in the NBA's minor league, which is the G League, they play each other, you'll find there's no audience for that. Now, if you take the best G League team and put them up against the best college team, you'd find the G League team would win. Because the G League team is all players who are either NBA caliber or very close to NBA caliber. And the best college team has maybe one or two guys who are going to the NBA, and most of them are not. And so the G League team would win, but nobody wants to watch G League, because when you watch G League, you're thinking in your head, well, I mean, they're good, but they're not NBA good. I mean, the NBA, they're not in the NBA. They're close to being in the NBA. So therefore, why I'm watching them? So it's best in class that matters. So we can illustrate this thing about basketball. Michael Jordan is considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time. You can measure how productive a basketball player is, and I've done that. He works up 230 wins in his career. And so he produced one win every 154 minutes he was on the court. The average player produces one win every 400 minutes. They're on the court because there's 5 players on a team, and so that's just the math how that works out. So Jordan is like 3 times better than the average NBA player. He's really, really good. But one win every 154 minutes, well, there's a collection of WNBA players in history who all produced more than one win per 154 minutes. In that sense, they're all better than Jordan. So Tamika Catchings and Sylvia Fowles and Candace Parker and Yolanda Griffith and Elena Del Don and Jonquel Jones, they're all better than Jordan in terms of how many wins they produce per 40. Now, would they beat Jordan a game? That's not relevant. It's best in class that matters. A featherweight that is undefeated is a better boxer. The heavyweight loses half their matches. It doesn't make a difference if the heavyweight would beat the featherweight. It only matters that the featherweight is better than their competition relative to the heavyweight compared to their competition. Okay, and so we had this competition about 50 years ago where Billie Jean King took on Bobby Riggs, and that was the Battle of the Sexes. That was national television in America, and that was supposed to be that women are just as good at men at sports. That doesn't make any difference. Nobody requires the featherweight to beat the heavyweight for it to be legitimate. It doesn't make a difference if Billie Jean King beat Bobby Riggs. Women don't have to beat men for it to be legitimate. And that's not the way we think about this. Okay, so that's my argument as an academic. Now, is that the way audiences would think about this? Okay, well, when you think about audiences, there's an argument men's sports are more attractive to fans than women's sports. Well, we want to start off with that. Men had a huge head start. When you think about why is the audience for men's sports so much bigger than the audience for women's sports right now? Well, men's sports all started back in the 19th century. So you see that with the English Premier League, you see that in America. You go back to any sports, they all go back decades. And so the fan base builds up because it's been around for a very long time. Fan bases take time to develop. I often say this to people talking about sports. Sports are not a circus. You're not going to sports. You're not going to a sporting event necessarily see some kind of amazing athletic achievement that you would see in a Las Vegas show. You're going to a sporting event because you're interested in who wins the contest. And that's what you're emotionally attracted to. But for you to be emotionally involved in it takes time. It takes time for you it takes time for other fans to develop. There has to be someone for you to talk to about this. So you can't just sort of put a sporting event that no one's ever seen before in front of them and say, hey, you should watch this. The first question they're going to have is, what am I looking at? So in the early history of the NBA, there were no fans. They only attracted 3,000 fans a game because nobody knew what a Boston Celtic was. No one knew at the time they were in Minneapolis what a Minneapolis Laker was. If you said Celtics Lakers in 1953, people are like, I don't know what the hell that is. And those names sound made up. Today, Celtics Lakers is a huge thing because there's a long history and people know the stories. Back in 53, there was no stories. Women's sports start off like that 50 years ago because initially women's sports are banned. Basketball was invented in 1892. By the end of the decade, colleges in America are banning women from playing it. They don't let them play it. James Sullivan is the head of the American Olympic Committee, the head of the American Athletic. He banned women from competitive swimming until he died in like 1915. In 1920, very famously, England banned women from playing soccer. So there's initially women are banned from playing sports. Then there's the whole issue of investment. As we point out in Slaying the Trolls, men love investing in men. When it comes to sports, men love men. That's the way it works. So you see a lot more investment in men's sports on the financial side around the world. So there's a lot of private investment in sports. There's a lot of public investment in men's sports, certainly in North America, where people are building stadiums for men's sports, but not for women's sports. So even in colleges where it's supposed to be equal, they're not equal. We still are not perfectly equal. And so men have this advantage. They have the time advantage. They have the investment advantage. And so as a result of that, and around the world, men's sports got this huge head start. There's a bigger pool of male athletes around the world. There's a lot of countries that have invested in this. It's a very competitive space because all that investment already happened. Countries around the world did not invest in women's sports. So because if all men's nations invest more in men's sports than women's sports, that tends to be competitive. So, and you can see that in the Olympic outcomes. So from 2008 to 2024, about 28% of Olympic medals in women's sports only go to the U.S. and China. They're the ones who've invested the most in women's sports. In this case, they also dominate men's sports, but not to the same degree. And so there's space here for someone to enter into women's sports. And so just to reiterate what I said earlier, Title IX passed in 1972. This is how America became competitive in women's sports. Women's sports were banned or underfunded around the world. America forces high schools and colleges to provide opportunities. Within a few years of Title IX passing, there's a huge change in how much girls and women participate in sports in high schools and colleges. This was not the case back in the 1960s, that girls were playing sports or encouraged to play sports, and they did not participate much in sports. And then when the opportunities became available, the teams were created. It turns out girls really like playing sports, and they started playing sports. And when they started playing sports, then you suddenly have a pool of potential Olympic athletes and potential professional athletes. But it doesn't start till 72. Again, the American male movement began like almost a century earlier, so they had this huge giant head start. So as a result of America investing in it, and especially in a lot of the high schools and colleges invest in team sports more than individual sports, America tends to do really well in the team Olympic sports. So women's basketball, Team USA has won 10 Olympic gold medals, 11 world championships. They're undefeated. Off the top of my head, I think the streak goes back at least 15, 16 years, completely undefeated. They've never lost, or they've barely lost. I know there's a lot of pressure on whoever is the coach of the U.S. women's national team I know Cheryl Reeve, she was the head coach. I felt in talking to her that she had this immense pressure that she had to win the world championship. She had the outcome was either you win or you're a failure. And that's a lot of pressure on a team, win or failure. That's that you have to win the gold medal or you fail. Because typically in Olympics, if you win the silver, that's pretty good. But if the women won the silver in the Olympics, that would have been really bad. People would have been very upset about that because they always win. And that's so we do really well in basketball because girls play basketball in the United States at a very early age. Same thing is true for soccer. Same thing is true for softball. This is what girls in the U.S. play, and so they tend to be very good on the international stage. Looking at where China dominates, they tend to dominate more in individual sports. And so that's where they seem to have invested a lot of their resources. And they do extraordinarily well in women's individual sports. And so, again, it's a matter of what you invest in and what outcomes you're looking for. Now, is there an audience for this? Is an audience for what these women are doing? Well, these are attendance records in women's sports. So Nebraska volleyball, they staged an event in Nebraska. They got 92,000 fans to show up for a women's volleyball match. So that's a lot of people. And also it's by the way, it was a ridiculous. They put the volleyball match in a football stadium. A volleyball court is too small. So the people in the stadium, it was really the point of the event that you were at the event. Nobody actually at the event saw the volleyball match because the court's too small. So it's like down there, they're playing volleyball. I can't see anything. Well, you're not going to see it. I have been at the Nebraska Stadium for the football. And I can tell you, you can't see football either when you're sitting in the stadium. So it's just 92,000 people. You don't see anything. So it's but volleyball, you definitely didn't see anything. But they did get 92,000 people show up for this. Women's soccer, this was in 2022, 91,000 people showed up for the champion UFA Champion League soccer match. So you can go on. There's a lot of attendance records. There's a lot of evidence that women's sports can attract large audiences. That definitely is true. Does it always? No, because it's just starting. So it's not going to always do that, but it can. And like the WNBA, and I'm going to finish off because I have 2 minutes left. I'll finish off the WNBA story. So I've done a lot of work on the WNBA. National Basketball Association starts in 1946. It took 20 years for the NBA to finally get to 6,000 fans per game. After 30 years, the NBA got to 10,000 fans per game. So that was 1976. The WNBA starts in 97. In their 29th season, they already had 11,000 fans per game. So they're actually, in terms of attendance, going faster than and this is just the data on that. This actually comes from, I wrote an article for the New York Times with Sarah Chodas actually put this graph. This graph didn't actually make the article. We have many graphs, but she did the graph. This is WNBA attendance. At the beginning, you can see that they start off with really high attendance. That's because they were kind of giving the tickets away. So that really doesn't tell us very much. You sort of see where they kind of level off around 6,000, 7,000 fans. There's a dip right here. Part of that's COVID, but part of that is WNBA teams are actually sabotaging attendance by putting the games in very small arenas that only sat like 4,000 people. So they sabotage their own attendance. And then in the last 5 years, you've seen this explosion in women's attendance. And now they're going faster than the NBA pace as more and more teams are actually properly investing in their team. You can see this on the revenue side. WNBA revenue going back 2019 to 2023, it doubled from 100 million to 200 million. A little bit off the pace of the NBA at the same point in their history, but it is now, the NBA pretty much had a linear path in the 70s and 80s. It just grew organically, not really anything spectacular going on. WNBA has had this spectacular growth that's happening right now where it's just going exponentially up. And so the WNBA has this huge increase in revenue. You can see that in franchise values from 2020 to 2025, the expansion fee went from 50 million to 250 million, went up 5 times in just 2 years. The New York Liberty, they sold for $14 million in 2019. They're now worth close to $500 million. So huge increase. So if you think about this long term, and we're sitting here in 2025, so I want people to imagine what's life going to be like at the end of the century, some 75 years in the future. You're going to see by the end of the century, women's sports are going to be thought of in the same way that men's sports are thought, in the same way that a middleweight boxer is thought of being the same thing as a heavyweight boxer. No one differentiates those things. A heavy boxing match and a middleweight boxing match both attract fans. Women's sports will attract fans just like men's sports do. Women can generate just as much revenue as men do. And therefore, if you're looking at where to invest, given where we're standing in 2025, the opportunities is in women's sports, not in men's sports. So that is my argument. So